All right, in this video, I want to show how to get to this graph using the data in the Brightest Nearest Stars spreadsheet on a MacBook. So the controls will be a little bit different if you were on a PC, but if you're on a MacBook, this should work. So here is the spreadsheet with nothing done to it. This is just the one you would download from the course website. And the graph that we're looking to make is this column here and this column here, temperature and luminosity relative to the luminosity of the sun. So the first thing I'm going to do is create this data here, and I'm going to do that by taking the number that's in the column E and raising it into the exponent of 10. So equals 10 raised to the power of that number. And so the sun has a luminosity relative to the luminosity of the sun of exactly 1. And then now that I've done that, I can drag the formula down so we get all the luminosities of all of these stars in the brightest group. I'm going to do the same thing over here. So equals 10 raised to the power of what's in column N. I don't need any parentheses. And then drag it down. And so now we have that data for the nearest stars as well. So brightest stars and nearest stars, we have the data we need to make the HR diagram. And what we want is the temperature data and the luminosity data. Now to highlight this column here on a Mac, you can hold down the Command key. So it's the key right next to the space bar. On some Macs, I think it might be the Apple key, but it's the Command key in mine right next to the space bar. And so now I've highlighted both of those columns, temperature, luminosity relative to the sun, and I will insert a scatter plot. Okay, now it's not going to look right at the beginning because two things are wrong. One, I want this to be a logarithmic scale. So if I go over to the axis and well, there's a couple of ways to do it. So if you right click, if you have the option to right click, you can right click on it, or you can control click. So I'm control clicking, and that brings me to this menu for this axis where I can format the axis. And here you can choose exactly how this axis looks. So what are the bounds? Where does it start and end? The thing I want to do is change it to a logarithmic scale because all the data is scrunched down at the bottom. And if I change it to a log scale, it will spread things out so I can actually see where the data is. Okay, so it looks much better. But the other thing about a HR diagram is the temperature needs to be plotted in reverse order. So you have the high temperatures on the left and the low temperatures on the right. So now I clicked on this axis, and notice that when I changed over to clicking on this axis, my menu here changed, and now I'm on the menu for formatting this axis. And right under the logarithmic scale, there's the option to put the values in reverse order, and now they're flipped around. So let me close this for a second. So I'm most of the way there. I've got the data and it looks right for the brightest stars. Now I want to add in another series, and the series I want to add in is the nearest stars. And to do that, I'm going to control click on the graph, just somewhere on the graph, control click, and now I can select data, and this will allow me to add a series. So I already have one on here, and let me just name it brightest. And then I can add another series, and we'll call it the nearest stars. And then you select the X values and the Y values. X values are temperature. So I'm choosing these temperatures. And the Y values are going to be the luminosities relative to the sun. So that's this column. Okay, so X values are temperature, Y values are luminosity, and now I've got two different series on the graph. So I should be able to click OK, and now I have my data, and it should look pretty close to the example before. There might be some other formatting things, and just to change like the font size and everything, and you can make this axis appear over here if you want. You can change those things around, but the data looks right. Now it looks like an HR diagram with things starting in the upper left and going down to the lower right, and you have your collection of stars here and down here. So it should look like you expect. Brightest and nearest stars.